Hey, what's up, Unbroken Nation? Hope that you're doing well wherever you are in the world today. I'm very excited to be back with you with another episode with my guest, Steve Simpson. For over 30 years, Steve has run a youth adult group called Together We Can Make It, is an author and an incredible speaker. Steve, my friend, it is an honor to have you on the show today. What is happening in your world?
A lot of exciting things, actually. By the way, I'm honored to be here with you as well.
Awesome. And it's all my pleasure, I assure you. Steve, for those who do not know you, I'd love if you give us a little bit of backstory and how you got to where you are today.
So let's start right off the old childhood, okay? We're talking first, second, third grade. Michael, you heard of an A student? What does being an A student? Okay, I was a Z student, okay? I was the opposite of an A student. If there was a test, I was going to fail it. If there was a class, I was getting thrown out of it, whether it be a fight, whether it be making jokes, made a lot of jokes. And the teachers would even laugh sometimes, except for some reason that made them twice as angry at me. And I go, but you laughed. Always failing, always failing. My lowest grade was a -20. And you could say, how do you get a -20? Well, what I used to, again, we're talking grammar school now. I had this notion that if a kid had really good grades, if he was smart, he had the best home life. Now, I was wrong, and we'll discuss that during this interview. But in my head back then, I was jealous of these kids, not because they really had the great grades, because my life was so messed up and hurtful, and I thought they had great lives. So what I would do is, during the test, I like to mess the kid up halfway through the test, write on his test, push his hand or her hand, whatever it's going to be. And then, of course, they had a grade, they start crying or they get all angry. And I did it once, and the teacher said, get back in your seat, and whatever you get, I'm taking off 20 points. Now, I thought I was going to show her. I said, not going to even try, write 0. And instead, she wrote -20. And she said, now you're going to need anywhere from 90s and even hundreds on your next test to pass. And I said back then, I will never in my lifetime get anything in the 90s or hundreds, ma'am. Now, what was the deal with me? I would still want to pass, but I would try to figure out how to cheat. I'd probably spend twice as long figuring out how to cheat than most kids did studying. My friends would say to me, why don't you just study? It would take half the time. And I would say, what's the use? So I believed if I studied, I'd fail anyway. I thought I was stupid. I thought I was a failure. I thought I was unwanted. Now, why all these thoughts? I had an alcoholic father who was very abusive, physically and verbally. And as far as the physical stuff, I like to say he had what I call a snap temper, where he could be talking like we're talking and just out of nowhere hit you, push you, throw something at you, and go in a rage. But to me personally, the physical stuff was horrible because I was always not knowing. Like I always say, I would eat as fast as possible to get away from the dinner table. To this day, I still eat fast. My friends are always like, yo, man, slow down. But that was my escape mechanism to get away. But it's the verbal abuse that caused me to be broken. It's constantly hearing since I was born, didn't want you, failure, stupid. A lot of curses I'm not going to say, but worse than the curses, though, were the sentences, okay, of you're never going to do anything, and look at you, of course you failed again. And that's why my mindset is. That's all I knew, okay? So I figured this has got to be true. I would cut school in those early grades. I got away with it because no one dreamed I was actually cutting at that early grades. But you know where I would go to? I'm going to show you the epitome of a low self-esteem. I would go to the local library. We had 2 libraries where I lived. There was a smaller one, quieter one. I'd go to that one. What would I do there? I'd read books, and I'd always walk up to the librarian and say, can I have a pen and paper? And most of them, they'd give me a pad and some pen. And I would write, even since a boy, short stories, poems, proses. I didn't know the core proses back then, but I would write them. And look at this picture of this now. Here's a young kid cutting school, in grammar school, but he's going out and he's reading, and I look back now beyond the average reading comprehension of a child that age, and writing. That's the epitome of a low self-esteem. Things just kind of get worse and worse. I always blame myself for my father's drinking because I was told that. Most people who live in alcoholic homes will relate to this. You get told this is your fault, or this is because of you, and I believed that. I remember times where he was so drunk, he couldn't even talk, but he'd look at me and point. And I know that meant your fault. So from the time I was 11 years old on, I started thinking and tried suicide, by the way. Think about it all the time, tried it. And I always say, I didn't want to die. I just don't want to live. Now you might say, that's the same exact thing, man. No, it's not. I had no idea what it was like being dead because I was never dead before. But I did know what it was like being alive. and it was pain, it was suffering. And I honestly thought, and this is key, it was never going to get better. See, I thought I was dumb, but if I really knew it was going to get better, I wouldn't have thought of killing myself. But I was convinced it's not getting better. And this went on by the time I was 12, started running away here and there. I was what you call a couch surfer, which means I hang out at friends' houses, stay overnights and so on. Skipping over a lot of long stuff back then, moved a lot of neighborhoods, custody battles of my parents when they started to separate. But eventually, one of the parents of kids I stayed over called Protective Services, and eventually ended up in foster home. I was in 2 foster homes, one for a month and one for a year. I could only say wonderful things about these foster parents. I know there's a lot of negative things about foster parents out there, but in my case, I only had wonderful experience. They were just caring people who just really wanted to help out children who had nowhere to stay. Because understand something, foster homes is not for criminals, or it's not juvie. It's for a child where the parents are messed up. There's something going on in the house that's abusive. They cannot live in that house anymore. Now, as you can imagine, accompanying that, you had to go to therapy. Now social services is in charge. And I also joined the self-help group. To me, that was everything. And I go into this group, I'm 13 years old, and one of the first things I discover is there's smart kids there. And I remember saying, "What are you doing here?" And one of them laughed and said, "I'm okay, Steve, how are you?" She says, "You'll figure it out." Well, some of these kids tried suicide more times than I thought about it, okay? And they had miserable lives, even though they had the grades. And that was a revelation for me, because they started saying that their alcoholic parent was calling them the same things my father was calling me. Now I said, whoa. Me? I'm the most hated kid amongst the teachers, okay? You're a teacher's pet. You're a dream for a parent. That's the point. And this was viewers, listeners to hear this. It was nothing to do with me, what I did, what I didn't do, whether I was a smart student, a bad student, whether I was a male, whether I was female, whatever I was or identified myself, whether someone's straight, whether someone's gay. It's not you. An abuser doesn't abuse you because of what you are, who you are, or what you do. They convince us it is. An abuser abuses you because they're an abuser, and they're going to abuse any kid. So if these other kids were my father's kid, he would have done the same thing to them. That to me was such a revelation. And then all the guilt, because I found out you can't make an alcoholic drink. He was drinking before I was born. You can't make your parents get divorced. That's between them. And then here's the big thing now, Michael. They used to write different meetings up every week, and I started doing that. And some of the kids said, "Hey, I can't write like this. This is like really great. Like, how come you're not doing great in school?" And I go, "Because I'm stupid." You can't be stupid and write like this. They actually taught me how to study. I didn't know how to study. And bit by bit, first ended up within that year on the honor roll. I went from failing to passing to passing honor roll. By the next year, guess what? Was getting 90s, pulled off 100 average on 2 topics in 2 quarters. Remember I said I would never do that in my lifetime. National Junior Honor Society, joined wrestling just to keep me busy, always had a winning record. Joined track for fun, I can run fast. Got the equivalent we call the black letter, was the MVP for the track team. But here's the best part, and I laugh at to this day. They made me student of the month. Now, not just for my class, for the entire, it was 8th grade then, the entire grade. They hung my picture up for 1 month saying, "Be like him, model student." I used to walk by that picture and laugh, because only 2 years before that same picture would be a dartboard in the teacher's faculty room. Okay, what changed? Nothing. I was the same person I was. When I was picking on the smart kids, I was one of them. I just didn't know that. And as you would say, that became my unbrokenness, my brokenness turning into being unbroken for myself. Didn't take school as long. I didn't finish school. I should have. Still regret it to this day, but that self-esteem, that confidence has made me successful in the business world. As you know, multi-published author, 4 books in print now, and been doing what we're doing here for most of my life at this point, whether it's media, whether it's in schools, sharing my experience and hope. And again, like I said, to me, self-esteem was everything for me. I give most of my life trying to make others aware, like we're doing right now, of the hope, because unfortunately, many people continue their lives and think they're stupid or they're a failure. And it's like that voice inside their head, unfortunately, that really came from an alcoholic and abusive parent. And as far as suicide, I want to kick something out there too. As far as suicide, for those here, for your audience, I have known many people because of my volunteer work, my travels, who was, including myself, who either tried suicide or thought about it. I did both, thought about it and tried it. And for those of us who tried it and lived, survived it like I did, not 90%, not 95%, 100% of us are glad we never died. Why? Things always got better somehow, some way. Now, if you're in school, I say go to the school social worker, because I always just say, I know what they're going to say. I know what they're going to say. I was wrong. Okay. They said a lot of things I didn't know about. They would help. Counseling, there's community centers, churches. There might be a religion you even belong to, but a lot of churches have self-help groups, 12-step programs, sometimes parish outreach programs. So those are also a great avenue, a place to get help from. And I recommend highly get the help. Things get better so much faster than you think. I'm going to add a little thing that most people go, really? When I was getting better, I got into volunteer work at a young age and helping other kids and stuff. So I'm going to recommend also, whether you're in therapy, self-help group, combination, do some volunteer work somewhere. Because even though you might say, how am I going to help other people when I need help? That's the point. It gives self-esteem. It gives self-worth. I know in 12-step programs, I think they call it service. And it helped me. By second, I started helping other people. I grew even better self-esteem. I was able to help take my experiences and help other kids out.
Yeah, I love that, Steve. And that's quite the journey. You know, it's funny. There's so many parallels between your experience and mine. I found myself skipping school and going to the library, in part because they had air conditioning and heat, but also because I liked being in the solitude. It always felt safe. And I think that also has played a role in me being a writer and an author and the whole nine. One of the things that you alluded to that I think is really phenomenal is being willing to show up for yourself, even at such a young age. And I recall years and years ago, someone told me, hey, when you're at your lowest, go and volunteer, go and be of service. And I have found that to be such an incredible part of my mission and my journey. I mean, that's really what Think Unbroken is, right? It's about us giving people the tools to create massive change in their life. I also grew up, the child of alcoholics. And I think growing up as a child of alcoholics, the effects of that, and then also like the tie-in of bullying carries so much weight. And I know many people who are listening to the Unbroken Nation, they also resonate with our stories, having alcoholic parents who were bullies, maybe even a sibling, things of that. And it tends to carry so much weight in their life. And even to this day where maybe it's a stuckness or a sadness or a longing or regret or feeling guilty or victimized. And so what I'm really curious about here, Steve, talk to us about how someone starts to really take their life back, especially after being a child of an alcoholic.
Well, I think one of the key things is this. First off, for me anyway, is that I blame myself. And so this is just me. It wasn't just me. It was the traits of being a child of an alcoholic. Always thinking that you're wrong. If you have a fight with someone, it's always your fault. Always your fault. Even if you're hanging out with friends and they get in a fight, you feel guilty. Somehow you started. Somehow you could have stopped it. So if you recognize your traits, if you do accomplish something, most children of alcoholics or victims of child abuse, you never give yourself the credit. If someone says that was a great job, you think of instantly in your head all the things you didn't do right. You might even say, well, yeah, I did that, but I could have done that, and I could have done that, and I should have done that. You can't even accept a compliment. You can't even say thank you, for the compliment. So for me, the first thing is to realize this is not who you are, okay? This is just a symptom of what you lived with, being a victim of abuse, being a child of an alcoholic. So that's the first major step. That means if it's not who I am, and if it's just a symptom, then I don't have to continue to think this way. I have to continue to be this way. And that is so important. Whether your method is therapy, whether your method is reading books on the topic, whether your method is, again, self-help groups, or a combination, okay? But it is important to do that. I stress, I love self-help type of groups because the fact that you see other people, the same problem as you realize it's not just me. And that's critical in that one, because it even affects your relationships. Many children alcoholics, we get into relationships, we get into abusive, we get abused by people, again, physically or verbally. Even something simple when you have friends, you never ask for what you want. It's always the movie they want to see because you don't want to get them angry. It may not be your friend if you get them angry. Always that people pleasing, always that trying to, do the right thing because you might lose the person, that fear of abandonment. So again, part of my, you would say, recovery, you might say, was to build that self-esteem and say, you know what, the person's going to love me for who I am or they're not, and it's okay to make mistakes. You said the wrong thing one day to a friend, you apologize. Real friendships don't fall apart over that. I tell you something, when I was in foster care, one of the major things that I realized was, it wasn't that the parents didn't fight. That wasn't the case. It was what they did when they argued. See, it wasn't a fight. It was a disagreement. It was an argument. They didn't go to DEFCON 4. Okay, they didn't start cursing each other out, saying hurtful things to each other, horrible things. They didn't threaten each other. And they certainly didn't physically go after each other. And that was a lesson for me, because in healthy relationships, that stuff's not supposed to happen. And we do find ourselves, we live these lives being in these hurtful relationships. Okay, and so again, that's some of the things I recommend to people heavily with that.
Yeah, and I agree with you. One of the things that was really fascinating for me, I lived with 30 different families as a child, just getting bounced around, getting evicted, never actually in foster care, but being in foster homes, being in homes of church families, being in homes of strangers, the list goes on and on. And seeing, I think one of the really incredible things, what you just alluded to, was this idea that people could have conversation without violence. And I know that we, as survivors and trauma warriors and people who have picked their lives up trying to move forward, we can catch ourselves in one of those relationships where suddenly you're like, oh shit, this actually feels very similar. And I know that that's very commonplace. And the word that comes to me when I think about that is this idea that there is still hope available, that you can shift that. You can have healthy relationships, not only with yourself, but with other people that are intimate and kind and loving and compassionate and have empathy involved in them. But I think, unfortunately, one of the things people hold on to, and this was my case for a very long time, was feeling like this is what I deserve, and feeling like I was carrying those scars, and that because of those scars, I was still had all this pain. And so, Steve, what I'm wondering here is, how can someone tap into hope in their life for things to be different, for them ultimately to have these things that they always hear other people have that feel like a fantasy, but I'm going to say for myself personally, I know are a possibility. And I was wondering if you talk about the power of hope in this.
Absolutely. I love what you said about deserve, because we tend to think I deserve this. And it goes back to that self-esteem, or maybe back to that tape playing of the alcohol parents saying, you deserved it. Look what you did. You messed up. So I'm going to, and I love that. And I'm going to say, and by the way, for example, how many times you heard someone say, every relationship I get in, it ends up being some abuser or some guy. I have the worst luck. It's not luck. It's not luck. It's we either are projecting something, and abusers do key in on people like that. They sniff us out, okay? Or we accept something, and we're showing that we accept it. Instead of on the first date saying, oh, this is the first and last date, we can just continue because, well, at least they said something nice to me. They might have been abusive in some other way. So I think hope, now, it's funny about hope, because I always think of the power of hope, and it is a power. Because without hope, there are some times, in my group that I run, I have an answer. I'm like the old wise guy on the hill, and I have you got to do this, and sometimes I don't have a specific answer to that problem. I just don't, not that day anyway. None of us do. But that's not the mission there. It's to give hope that things will always get better, and they do. Answers come. Sometimes God has you on a path you think is destructive, and it's not. Okay? So for me, the number one thing I give is not to be always have this, but to give the person hope. Okay, because when you have hope, everything goes, then I'm fine. Again, when I was younger, I wanted out because I lost all my hope. I didn't think it was getting better anymore. I said 11 years of this, that's enough. Okay. But so again, and I find hope is power, faith also, whatever religion you are, that's your business. But I do find for me, sometimes I've said over the years, I don't see how I'm getting through this. I don't see how I'm ever going to be happy again, whether I had a loss, maybe it was a death, maybe something collapsed around my life, one of those days, okay? And I said one of our personal earthquakes in our lives happened. And here's the key of hope and faith. I realize I might not see a way out of it, but God does. And he knows more. He's smarter than me, knows more than me. I know in 12-step programs, one of the steps I think is came to be the power greater than ourselves can restore us to sanity. And I'm not on a 12-step program, by the way, but I love the steps. And I'm going to say that greater. And just because I can't see a way out of this doesn't mean there isn't a way out of this. And when I hold on to that, I'm still responsible for trying. I'm still responsible, again, for seeking out help. I'm still responsible for, if I am in an abusive relationship or friendship or situation, I need to get out, and I don't deserve to get out of it. But I got to tell you something, so many times in my life when people tell me, Steve, this ain't not going to work out. Or for a friend of mine, I don't know why you're giving the hope, man. How is that going to work out for her? And guess what? It did work out. Maybe a different role than we thought, but it did work out. And I was happy again. And I was able to move on again, whether, again, it be a loss or a disappointment or even a mistake. Part of hope, too, I got to tell you something. I just had this discussion, too. My group recently is humor, laughing and even laughing at our own selves. And we all make mistakes. And I think part of the problem, too, is we define ourselves as those mistakes. We're not our mistakes. They're just things that we did. Everybody makes mistakes. Everybody makes mistakes. But we define ourselves as that or the result of that, and that's false. You need to let it go and move on. And sometimes you just laugh at yourself. It's okay. Not make fun of yourself. I didn't say that. Laugh. Well, I can't believe I said that or I did that. All right, what you going to do? And it's okay to have people laughing, not at you, but with you. And there is this difference. And just kind of moving on with that. Okay. And it's wonderful when you have people that can relate to you. And I stress groups because the fact that they can say, Steve, I did the same thing, man, 2 years ago. I did whatever, 10 years ago. And you just feel you're not the only one who does it. But it's so important. I even see celebrities do that. They beat themselves up miserably sometimes over things. They just don't get, it's okay. Move on. Okay. No mistake is going to devastate us so much we can't move on for it. I always say to people, think of a problem you had like 5 years ago and it consumed you and all your time. By now, that mistake is history. It's gone. Think of one you had 10 years ago. Think of things in my childhood that would occupy my constant thought. Those mistakes are history. They don't exist. They have no power over me. And that's the key for hope. Whatever you're going through, whatever problem you have, it will lose its power. It has to. That all things must pass and it will dissipate. And I think sometimes we believe we're stuck in this mistake for the rest of our life. We will never be. It doesn't work that way.
That's beautifully said, and I totally agree. I feel that in this journey, one of the things that we have to face that's true about our experience is that the things that happen to us in childhood, we are not culpable for. We do not take, and we should not take responsibility for abuse, for homelessness, for violence, for any of those things. And yet, maybe it's through indoctrination or embedding or coercion, however you want to phrase it, there's this keen sense of shame and guilt that is often tied to our experiences. And you talked about this idea of letting go. And I think from a hypothetical standpoint, that sounds very simple for many people, right? They're like, oh yeah, sure, great, Steve, I'm just going to let go. But I know for certain from my case, and I believe from many others, that letting go almost feels like there's something deeper to it. And so what I'm curious about, Steve, in your journey and how you support people and Together We Can Make It, and with all the things that you do, how do you believe that someone can really let go of shame and guilt and that culpability that's actually not theirs? What does it look like to get to that place of actually letting go?
Well, you said indoctrinated, and I relate to that because that's what I was just told. So it was a reflex for me to feel guilty. And even if you, by the way, I'll stress to you too, even if we did something that might get the average person upset, you turned wrong, you knocked over the dinner table, whatever, you know what I'm saying? Or they have a right to be upset, but to abuse you over it, absolutely, positively not. Okay. And we have to, and it's like a re-education almost. And I think for me, again, that's why therapy is so important, to hear that other voice or a self-help group, hear those other voices tell you that you are not responsible for your abuse. It makes no difference what you did. Here's the thing too. A lot of us think we're always busy, so busy fronting all the time. Okay. I like holidays. Holidays were miserable for me always. I was going to be home more, out of school, and he was going to be drunk more. But when you're in school, what everyone always said, I had a great man, I had a great time. 1 out of every 5 children today, 1 out of every 5 children is a child, an alcoholic, or a drug abuser. That's a fifth of your classroom. Okay, that's something to think about. Okay, and so that alone. So first off, I think the key is to realize you're not the only one going through this. You're not the only one who's lived through this. You're not the only one, unfortunately, who feels guilty through this. And that's why it's so important to hook up with other people like this, because they're going to nod their heads and they're going to laugh, but not laugh because they're making fun of you. Like I would say things, and he said this to me, and it's my fault. And they would say, Steve, I did the same thing. It's not your fault. It's not your fault. And I think so that's very important, to undoctrinate yourself. But it's also key, and I got to say this, like we discussed earlier, if you're going to get involved in relationships that are abusive as you get older, it's going to be harder to get unbroken. It's going to be harder to heal and stop this, because you're going to have new people telling you it's your fault, it's your fault. So I got to stress that too. We have a need so badly to be loved, to be accepted, just to have someone. I used to equate in my self-esteem, when I had a girlfriend, I'm full. When I didn't have one, that's all wrong, man. We're supposed to be 100% on our own. And when you get in a healthy relationship, you add to each other. But that person's not supposed to rescue you. You're not supposed to rescue them. You're not really supposed to. I know it sounds nice as a writer. We complete each other. You're supposed to be complete without them. And I think that's paramount. So, and don't be so desperate that out of the need to love, you accept unacceptable behavior. Because when you're with healthy people, I used to conclude is when you're with healthy people, relationships, friendships even, okay, that's where that guilt starts going away, because you get treated like a human being. And someone will say, how do you feel about this? What would you like to do, Steve? So I think that's just experience in healthy relationships is healing alone.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think also having a couple of things. One, a tremendous amount of clarity about what you want in a relationship. That applies to friendship, that applies to business, career, everything. Also leveraging your boundaries, which I think is incredibly, incredibly important, and not bending who you are for the sake of not only necessarily just appeasing other people, but connection, because that's immediately going to be false. And then also recognizing like respect is super important. Like I've come to realize, like if you're telling people in your life, like you don't feel respected, you don't feel appreciated, that's probably a sign that you need to move away from that. And I think people get so tied up in this idea that, well, you know what, they still love me, so I can accept the disrespect. And that becomes very dangerous, because the truth about it is you deserve exactly what you're willing to tolerate. And that's a hard thing to recognize. And you deserve more than what you have tolerated up till now, which means that you have to hold true to your boundaries. You have to say no, you have to say yes, and put yourself in a position where you take power over your life. One of the things you said that I'm really interested and curious about, that loops us back to earlier in the conversation, is talking about being of service. I would love if you take a couple of minutes and talk about why you created Together We Can Make It. Talk about the books. Talk about why you want to do. But before you do that, I would love if you could speak to the people who they contemplate being of service and yet don't do it. Because I used to be that guy. I'd be like, one of these days. And I never did until I did. And I'd love if you give some words of advice for people who are in that place as well.
Sure. And I think one of the reasons people want to do it and hesitate, they think they can't do a good job. They're going to fail at it. You think that I'm not worthy. This is for someone else. I'm going to mess this up. Someone's better than me. Someone's better than me can do this. And so first off, no one's better than you. And just jump into it. Just jump into it, because the longer you hesitate, you're not going to end up doing it. You'll think about it. Well, I know I could be doing some help over here, some volunteer work there. I could be doing this. I don't know. What if I mess it up? And, just go into it. Okay, that's number one. Don't think you are worthy. You can do it. It really is that simple. Because we learn. By the way, we learn things. I'm fairly well at what I do, but I wouldn't like that overnight. I had my falls and trips and like, oh, I guess I should never say that to someone with that problem. That didn't work. And we learn. That's okay. It's a journey. But take the journey. Start the first steps of the journey. Okay. And again, it's so important. Again, as far as my group, I love that. I started because the fact that I know what I went through at that age, and I know that it was just so important for me to have some way to go, same time every week. That's the time period. My friends know. My business people know, don't bother. He's not going to return your phone call that night, that time. He's with his group, okay? And just to know that no matter what happens in my life, I wanted to create something where they know that that's going to be there for them. And whether some nights I'm annoying to them, oh, they go Steve again, but that's okay. I've been told this. You annoy me a lot of times, Steve. You're repetitive, but I know you're there. I know you're sincere, and I can rely on you. Because a lot of us live the lives that we live. People are unreliable, unfortunately. Our parents were, that's for sure. So I would say, again, I want to be reliable. And I wanted just to let people know in my group, another thing I do is if they're responsible for the problem, let's say they messed up, I still love them. We all show our love for that person still, because that's okay. Because unfortunately, today's times too, when someone messes up today, people abandon them. They jump ship. And they need someone. I know they want someone to go where, okay, let's talk about how we don't do stuff again. We don't mess up again. But however, that being said, it's okay. We still love you. Maybe someone's going to make a joke about it somehow. And we'll all laugh with it, laugh together with the person. And I carry it throughout because we'll all know if someone's hurting, we all know to call that person during the week too, or text someone, just let them know, hey, still thinking about you. How's it going, man? Is everything going okay with you? Just in case before the next meeting you need to talk with me or go out and get something to eat. I'm always want to go out and eat anyway. I love it. Still my favorite thing to sit with a friend and just sit somewhere and eat. So I open that invitation up. And so again, that's one thing. And as far as my writing, I wanted to, it's funny, I write fiction and nonfiction, and I combine them because the fiction part was since I'm a kid. It was my escape. Okay. Other writers sometimes give different reasons why they write, because of the art, because of, the talent, the art. I'm honest. I started writing. That was my escape, man. That was my fantasy world, just to get out and start writing things. But one thing with me is I put myself and my characters, like no matter how fantastic the story might be, whether it's one of my science fiction books, adventure books, action drama, but the characters are so realistic because they could be children of alcoholics and victims of abuse, runaways. I put that into my characters as well to make them lovable and real. Now, what I've also done is I wanted to relay my personal experiences in writing, how I boosted my self-esteem up, why I didn't report child abuse. Well, I will get that a little bit too. My transition, because you can't get from one space to the best place right away. How to be patient with myself. Bullying. Why is someone always tend to be bullied? So what's going on with that? I wrote the teenage and young adult guide, survival handbook. And that's an insert in any of my 4 action novels. I put it in any. Now, why I do that? 2 reasons. One is if a young person wants the handbook, the teenage young adult survival handbook. If they just ask for the handbook, people, why do you want that? It puts them on the spot. Because it's an insert in my fiction books, I just love these stories, man. Look, and the covers are all fiction covers. In reverse, if you want to give this information to a young person, whether you're a teacher, youth group leader, counselor, when I was going through all that stuff, if you just told me I have a book for you on being a child of an alcoholic, or someone's thinking of suicide, or maybe you're being abused, or self-esteem, I would have said, I don't need that. What, are you kidding me? I would walk right away from you. The fact that it's an insert inside of my fiction books. Now you can say, what's this? Oh, I know you love these kind of action stories. It's just like the movies you like to see. Yeah, that's all I ever hear in my books. These read like a great movie. And then you got, oh, okay, I'll read it. And you just say a prayer that while they got it, they're going to say, what's this other book inside here? And then they get the information. The key is just to get the information, life-saving information. I also give different places they can go to for help. And number one thing is hope. The number one thing I try to accomplish even in my writing is to let them know there is always hope. This is not the end. This is not permanent. If you're willing to take the step forward and ask for help and try for help, that's one of the main themes I put out in the handbook.
Man, that's so powerful. One of the things I want to circle back to as well here is, you talked about suicide, and that's a subject that hits home for me. The Unbroken Nation audience knows about my experience with it personally and in my family. And I think that, excuse me, let me rephrase that. I know that there are people listening right now who either have been in a suicidal ideation situation or attempted or know someone who has. Unfortunately, I think that you and I both know this is an incredibly common experience for many, many people, probably more so than we ever can imagine. And I'm wondering a couple of things. Were there periods, and yes, I understand you were young, but was there something that happened that not only changed your mind, but has helped you progress to where you are today, that you've been able to hold on to, that's kept you alive and in this life? And then the other part of the question is there something that someone can do for themselves or for others that may be suicidal or need some help right now?
Yeah. So for me, again, once I got help, therapy and self-help, I was able to start experiencing some successes. See, prior to that, everything was collapsed around me. So I just figured this is always going to happen. And I was, by the way, I wanted to stress something too. I was never walking around gloom and doom. I was always cracking jokes. I need to stress that. We've had some celebrities, as we know, that were always smiling, joking around, hyper, and yet they either did commit suicide or tried it or thought about it. So, I mean, people would want to sit with me at the lunchroom table when I was, because I was always going to do something different. So again, if you looked at the face value of it, this kid's cracking jokes all the time. No way he's thinking of killing himself. But I was in such pain inside. I was in such pain. Dreaded going home. I dreaded turning that doorknob to go into the house. If I could have got home later as possible, that's what I wanted to do. And so again, once I got help, you see, all of a sudden, because I shifted things in relationships, I didn't accept unacceptable behavior. I was able to get positive things happen in my life. I was able to accomplish things. Then it wasn't always, when there's a problem, it's always going to be a sad ending. I had some happy endings. Now, I'm not saying every problem is going to result in a happy ending, but the point is, once I was able to experience, hey, things can really work out. I can be happy. I can really be happy. Not 100% of the time, but happy. That took away that I'm getting out of here, thoughts of suicide, because it's never getting better, because I was able to replace it. And now when I go through things, by the way, not that I haven't had problems as an adult, like all of us, believe me, things come our way. We all have our storms in our lives that hit. But the difference is, I know now, oh, come on, Steve, you're getting through this, just like you got through the other things. That was devastating. That was devastating. That was a loss. But you're getting through this loss. You're getting through this failure, whatever I interpret it as, okay? So I think now the difference to me, if you read my mind versus my old thought pattern was, oh, no, not again. I can't do this. No. Versus, okay, we're going to deal with this. I'm going to say a prayer right now. I'll say a Hail Mary and then get up, take a deep breath. And I always say to people, by the way, if you are in school, go to school. If you're at work, go to work. Do not stay home. The temptation is, I'm not going in today, and I just want to stay home and stay in. No, get out of that house and get with people. Get into the routine. You may not be doing the best. I remember years ago, I worked at a gym, and guys, this was like a powerlifting gym. These guys were incredible. And sometimes they tell the owner, I'm going home, man. My head's on it. I'm not going to hurt myself. He said, no. Take all the weights off the bar. Go through the routine with just the bar. And they go, what? Just the bar? These guys were really benching 400 or 500 pounds. Just the bar. He says, go through your routine. Don't stop the routine, because you're going to get out of it. And I take that on an emotional level. I say, go through your routine. You may not be the best in school that day, the best at work that day, the best with your friends, someone's birthday party you're supposed to go to, but just use the bar emotionally. Go through the routine. Get out of that house. Stay in that. And I follow that myself religiously, okay? And that's why I stress it's important, too, to have positive people in your life. Not just, because also you're hanging out with people that are drugging and drinking, that's going to make you more depressed. That's not, don't go back to girlfriends or boyfriends if they're abusive. That's a temptation sometimes at loneliness. But I'm saying be with people that are healthy, that are happy. So again, get out that door. Force yourself out the bed, out the door. Take that shower. Okay, come on, go through that routine. Get out of there and go to work. In fact, one thing I've also learned, I mean, if there's a day where I can't be with nobody to tonight, and I'm so lonely right now, or my friends aren't be around to tomorrow, get to a movie theater. I just go see it. Go see it by yourself. Or we discuss libraries. Because there's other people around you. You see what I'm saying? You go to a park or something to keep you busy. Be around people. Be around people. I can't tell you. And that's why I also mentioned to the volunteer thing. Because, if you again, I've heard many people over the years say, part of what holds me together, and I'm going to say this for myself, is my volunteer work. Because there are times, that little depression starts knocking on the door. Hey, Steve, how you been? But if I'm busy helping other people, I'm walking my talk now, because I'm listening to myself help someone else and give them suggestions, and I start following it myself too. So I got to also say that's again why I say giving to other people, and just keep that in your life. It will keep you. I hate to say, kept me out of trouble, kept my self-esteem up as well.
Yeah, I love that, Steve, and I'm right there with you. And again, I'll just point to the fact that, I mean, even today, with the volunteer work I do, running the show, I mean, even if you're, people will say, well, there's COVID, you can't do things, blah, 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 whatever. I'm like, start a podcast, do a blog, interact with people, online support groups. There's so much available for us right now. And I think that you have to be willing to have the courage to ask for help. And the only way you're going to get that is by taking that first step, right? Commit to your life, make a decision, follow through. And I want to agree with you, Steve. I understand why people take their lives. I was there. I understand it's dark. I like you, it's like I didn't want to die, but I just didn't want to live anymore. And on the backside of that, life is so much better. And so if you take anything from this conversation, it's this: know that you're not alone. Know that you're not a bad person for having these thoughts, because guess what? We all do. And ultimately, if you're willing to seek help and support, it will be there for you, but you must ask for help. Steve, this has been an absolutely incredible conversation. Before I ask you my last question, can you tell everyone where they can find you?
Easiest way on the website, which is powerpublishingcorp.com, powerpublishingcorp.com. Not just for the books, but even for interviews, things I post, things I try that might help someone. Okay, that's probably the easiest way to find me out there.
Amazing. And of course, we will put that link in the show notes. Steve, my friend, my last question for you is, what does it mean to you to be unbroken?
For me, it means, again, I'm going to say that word again, hope. It means faith. It means that I know I can be happy. Okay. My life doesn't always have to be a sad ending at the end of the story. Okay. Being unbroken also means that I can be in relationships and be in healthy relationships and friendships. Why? Because I'm not broken anymore. Okay. And that's very important. And even in my success in my business, success in my writing, all these things in my life today. In fact, I loved your show. When I saw the name, I loved it, because I said, boy, does that define me, because I live a life of, when I was growing up, that was broken. There's no question about it. But I live a life of being unbroken, and I'm happy to be unbroken, because, again, it's happiness, and it's just faith and optimism of what more comes in the future.
Beautifully said, my friend. Thank you so much for being here. Unbroken Nation, thank you so much for listening. Please like, subscribe, comment, share, tell a friend. And until next time, my friends, be unbroken. I'll see ya.